S08E18. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host Alex, and with me I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, look, I'm all right. It's good to be talking about championship football again. So
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been it must be close to a month since we last played a game, so it was good to see City back in competitive action over the weekend and picking up a pretty valuable point away at Watford. I think Brad and I were saying last week on the podcast, about probably a draw was best we could hope for, and to get a clean sheet out of it as well was pretty good to see.
yeah, I think you could see. I think we could see that Rosini's done a lot of work with the boys over the World Cup break. Um, you know, it wasn't obviously like perfect return would have been 3 points, but as you say, like a good side in Watford. A 0-0 draw is actually, a pretty valuable point, and I thought it was a pretty well earned point as well. I think there was a little bit of competitive rust probably from both teams, and then a few things, a couple of the weird 8-minute injury, or like subs for both teams that made things a little interesting. But I think on the balance, it was a pretty strong performance. I think without I think lacking still a little bit up top, but general play and general build up was pretty good, and I think we looked more comfortable playing the ball around the back for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
For the most part, more than we had done before the break in the few games before the break, I think.
Yeah, I think the conditions, as you say, it was pretty interesting. I think Rosenia in his post-match called out the fact that we'd been doing essentially a warm weather camp in Turkey, and then going from that into the conditions at Watford, always ripe for injuries. And unfortunately, Pelkas has come out with an injury, although that's more a collision injury, I would have thought, than muscular. It does seem like he's out for 3 months now, which is a shame. It just we just don't get any luck with injuries. It just seems as if as soon as it's starting to look like we're getting back to a fully fit squad, something else goes wrong. I mean, Ali and Tete due back sort of mid-January. Obviously, Oscar back from his ban in our next game against Sunderland. But really unfortunate for Pelkas. I think he was really starting to look like one of those really good creative players up forward for us, giving us a really great option in attack.
Yeah, I think he had been looking really good before the break, and I think we really felt his absence. As he subbed off very early in that game, we really felt his absence and his creativity and his spark in that final third, because we didn't really create a great deal of chances, a few, but just we lacked a little bit of I don't know, that creativity, that nous in the final third, which he seemed to have been bringing, and it is a shame. I think 3 months means, if he stays and he comes back, potentially, he's going to be very valuable if he can come back in and get straight to where he was at. He could be very valuable in the last, dozen games of the season or so. But no, he's missing a vital chunk of the season, really, as it stands, which is
And as you say,
really
I mean,
unfortunate.
He's only on loan from Fenerbahce as well, so there's also that question now that it's unfortunate timing coming into the window that whether we keep him. I hope we do. I think we've seen enough from him that he's got a place in the squad if he can, as you say, get back up to where he was. I guess in terms of positives as well, though, Tyler Smith, a bit of a surprise start. I mean, I know he'd played a bit in those two friendly games in the World Cup break. Looked pretty impressive. Seemed to earn his start really up forward, looking really creative. And Christie probably another one who, talking about chances created, I mean, he was sort of at the heart of pretty much anything we did create.
Yeah, I think I was, we saw the lineup and we saw Smith up front, and we just sort of, and I certainly sort of wrote it off. I just thought, here we go, the game where he's not going to do anything. He's just going to bundle around and stuff up his first touch and give the ball away and not. But there was a couple of nice runs. I think one where he turns off the shoulder and rolls in behind the defender to get a strike away from pretty close range. Some nice work. I think he held the ball up in the corner under quite a lot of pressure for a hot second to let some of the reinforcements arrive up front. So there was actually I think some promise in his performance. So not sure what it was. Maybe just got the right sort of instructions from Rosenia or the right sort of work over the break, because he looked almost nothing like the Tyler Smith we've seen in the rest of his City career. So it was quite nice without being spectacular. If you played like that every week, I'd be happy to keep him in the squad. To be honest, he was,
Yeah.
there was enough there that you continue, that you persevere with him as a player. But and yeah, Christie, I think pretty much since he's come in, like, the first half of the season, we went, well, Louis Coyle's the right back. We don't really have any alternatives, and then we've got we brought Christie in. He's getting on a bit. Is he going to be able to to play, I guess, week in, week out at a high level? Is he going to have the legs that Louis Coyle does? I mean, I knew he'd have quality, but I think his ability to, like, the extent to which he's showing that, and the legs that he is showing, and his, I think he's balanced that really well with, I guess, like maybe a better understanding of the game. So he's able to pick his moments of going forward and staying high or dropping back to help a little bit better than perhaps Coyle does at times. But no, very obviously very dangerous on the ball, Christie. And again, yeah, was involved in lots of the stuff we did going forward. Another few mazy runs, from right back through the midfield to link up with other mids and the forwards. So another productive game from him. But I honestly think that the best player, the best performer on the pitch, and the player who saved us a point at least, was Matt Ingram, brought back
Yeah.
in after Baxter's little trip back to Chelsea with his injury in the break. But I thought, I mean, to be fair, I don't think he's actually played a bad game all season.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
like
right.
he wasn't playing poorly when they changed to Baxter. So obviously he's just been there in the background working hard and waiting for that chance. And I think as with both of them, I think every time they've been given a chance, they've sort of grabbed it with both hands. So good on him. It was good for us. I think there was a couple of saves that were just sensational. That one through there's a one through traffic right and bottom left hand corner that he got a good strong hand to, was really, really impressive.
There was another one where I think it was almost like a double save. I think he sort of like palmed it forward and then caught it, or sort of knocked it away again or something. Yeah, because I was going to go on to Ingram as well, because it gives us a really good problem to have now, which is we've got these two great keepers. But the issue I find is we've got Ingram, who's the great shot stopper, and Baxter, who's probably a bit better with the ball at his feet. And you almost want to just combine the two of them to make the complete keeper. But yeah, no, Ingram had a fantastic game again.
Yeah, and I guess just really good. I think, yeah, good for him. I guess the only other big one, I guess, was McLaughlin finally getting a start and putting in, a solid performance.
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of waited all season for him to get his chance in the starting lineup. You have to think as McLaughlin, he must have thought, what did he have to do to get into the side when you've got guys like Figueiredo not putting in the best of displays? And yeah, he looked great. So hopefully we've sort of found that spot for him now with Greaves playing at left back, which, I mean, feels a bit odd because it then raises questions about Fleming and Elder. But Greaves at left back, it then opens that slot on the left of the defence for McLaughlin. And I would certainly hope that he'll hold his spot for the Sunderland game.
Yeah, I mean, if he didn't, he'd have to, the writing, sure. I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't understand why, but you'd say the writing was on the wall. If he came in, played well, and then they dropped him for the next game, a 0-0 against where's Watford, top 6?
Top 4, I think, yeah.
Yeah, right, 0-0 against a top team is a good result for us languishing down the bottom, just outside the relegation zone. So, I think it'd be hard luck on poor old McLaughlin if something unfortunate like that happened. But I guess I mean, we've touched on it before, but it's interesting, the Greaves going to left back and all that sort of. I guess like the positive is there's a little bit of versatility where we go, well, we've got potentially you got Greaves, Figueiredo, Jones, McLaughlin, who can all play centre back, but when playing four at the back now, so we only really need two of them. But Jones can also play he can play centre back or defensive midfield. So if there was an injury in midfield and Jones had to step in, like at the end of the game, then you can bring someone in to either Figueiredo on into centre half, or bring Greaves back inside and then bring on Elder. This is interesting. We sort of have actually quite a fair bit of cover across that back line now, where at the beginning there was a point in time where it didn't really feel like we did. Like at the beginning of the season, we were going, do we actually have enough? Like I feel like we still need another centre back or something, and like we needed another left back or whatever. But we sort of now, like Fleming's back from injury and some of those sort of things. We sort of have now. We've got two right backs, I guess, three left backs with Greaves playing there, plus like
five centre backs, I guess, because you could, or four centre backs, I guess, because you could say you got Jones, Figueiredo, Greaves, McLaughlin, who can all play there. Yeah.
So it's kind of very interesting in that area pretty quickly, but obviously, and I guess, the Pelkas injury is not going to change that too much, because I guess that'll mean that Tufan now gets a chance to see what he can.
If he'd got his shot on target in this game, that would have been the perfect way to shut the Watford fans up. It's sort of the script was written for him to bury that in the top corner, and unfortunately wasn't to be the case.
Yeah, look, that was a head in hands moment for I think everyone involved. I don't know whether there was a bobble or he just took his eyes off the ball or what, but it was pretty horrible attempt. Without anyone around him, I would have expected at least a save. He only had to get it on target, but look, he'll pretty much guarantee he's going to get a chance then this weekend. And look, I think if they get the right balance around him and they feed him the ball in the right spots and he gets to sit, I think if he sits a bit higher, sits in behind Estepinian or something, and doesn't have to do as much tracking back potentially, I think that'll suit him a little bit more. I think he sort of
was it the Burnley game, I think, where they were playing that sort of similar 1-2 roll off each other, where it was Tufan who scored the goal, or was it Oscar? Yeah, it was Tufan that scored the goal, I think, against Burnley. I think, unless I'm misremembering.
Was that the one where he ran in behind? They played it over the top and he ran away with it?
Yeah. I think that was Oscar and Tufan. But anyway, did you want to give your 3-2-1 for this game, and then I'll give mine?
Sure. I mean, which is interesting because one of my players we haven't even talked about in our discussion so far. But so my 3 points I'm giving to Ingram, because I just thought he saved us points without much potentially going on up front. There was a few vital saves which really changed or kept us alive in the game at important points. So 3 points to Ingram. I'm going to go 2 points to Smith for a much improved performance. Actually looked like he could almost be a semi-decent striker with a little bit better service. And I almost feel like, again, had Pelkas has been able to stay on the whole game, he's the sort of player who would have been able to unlock Smith into a couple of nice little balls in behind the defence and everything, but not to be. And I'm actually going to give 1 point to Seri, who I thought actually was a really solid, had a really strong performance, battled away in the midfield. And a couple of moments, he does sometimes hold onto the ball a little too long at moments, but I thought what was really nice was whenever he lost it, he was battling so hard and so quickly to win that back, and quite a few times he might have lost it, but he recovered it quite quickly as well. So I thought he had a really, really important role to play in the game as well.
Yeah, I've gone with Ingram for my 3 votes as well. I think he was pretty much head and shoulders above the rest of the players on the pitch, but that's not to say that there weren't good contributions from the other players. I gave Christie my 2 votes. as a confession, at 2 a.m. on a Monday game is pretty difficult to stay up for. So I did just see the highlights. So that's very much colouring my voting for this game. But I thought Christie was at the heart of most of the positive attacks that we basically initiated against Watford. So he was definitely a candidate for the 2 votes for me. And then 1 vote for Smith. As you say, I think he looked really good, really sharp, had a couple of chances. And if that's sort of the form that he's able to display in this system, then it alleviates a bit of the pressure on Oscar when suddenly we've got Smith, we've got Longman, Tete when he's fit as well, all suddenly options that can play up top. As well as Oscar, so that he doesn't have to battle alone. I mean, I'd be really interested almost to see where I think we sort of said it last season about Smith and Eves, but you could almost say be interesting to see Smith and Oscar this season, because Oscar, with his hold-up play, could actually be a really good option to have sort of Smith playing off him and kind of creating that space for him. So we'll see what Rosenia has in store. Okay, just a bit of off-field news then. With the club celebrating 20 years at the MKM, this stadium, this weekend, I did sort of wonder in the chat. I assume it must be deliberate that we're playing. So we must have organised to play Sunderland this weekend. I don't know if clubs have that power. I've never really noticed it before of sort of organising fixtures for certain dates. Maybe that's me being accustomed to it in Aussie rules and stuff where you can get that, but it's an awfully big coincidence that, or unless we've deliberately chosen the weekend that we're playing Sunderland. But I think this is actually 20 years since we played our first game at the MKM. Unless I'm wrong, I can't remember if that was the start of a season, but I could be misremembering. But anyway, we played Sunderland in a friendly as our first game at the stadium, and so it's fitting that we're playing them this weekend. I guess I was just trying to think, sort of particular memories. It's hard to call out memories of favorite memories of the ground. It's more so, I guess, famous fixtures at the ground. But there's been a lot of them over the years, obviously. I mean, we've got the playoff for, first leg against Watford, I think it was, or maybe it's the second leg in 2008. We had the second leg against Derby, which we'd lost. So it actually wasn't a great result back in 2015 or 2016. We've got the FA Cup quarterfinal win against Sunderland again. So again, appropriate team. But there's been a lot of games over the years. Is there anything in particular for you that stands out, or key memories of the ground?
I don't know.
It's a hard one. I was thinking about it.
Yeah. I think this is something I probably would have I needed probably to have looked at this a bit earlier and had some time to think and go back through the memory bank a little bit to think. Nothing really nothing really stands out particularly, but I think it's one of those things because I've never been to the ground as well, it's hard to solidify some of these memories about specific games when I'm just watching them from the other side of the world.
Where you can sometimes forget if it was at home or away, yeah.
Yeah, because there's stuff there's games obviously I followed the Central Coast Mariners in the A-League, and I used to live there, so I went to heaps and heaps of games, and I can remember specific games and score lines and which players and what I did when I remember we played Sydney and we smashed Sydney FC, and I left the ground. I rang my friend because he was a Sydney supporter and gave him a hard time, and all sorts of wonky I can remember all these very specific things about that because I was there and a part of it all. I think it's just difficult from the other side of the world to have that really close connection with the ground as a place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was actually just thinking about it, and all my memories do go back to my trip when I was over there, and I guess sort of, the first time you see the ground or the first time you step foot in it, very distinctive sort of memories. First game there was the 3-1 win against Liverpool, and I had people around me just sort of saying, "Oh, can you just move here and just be, if this is the sort of luck you're going to bring every game?" Because then, of course, I think it was my third game there was the 6-0 win against Fulham. So both pretty memorable fixtures at the ground. But look, it's a really sort of symbolic. It's got a really symbolic place in our history, I think, because it really marks that turning point in League Two where we went from our sort of struggling seasons in the bottom division to really making that march up the table to the Premier League, which was achieved in, I think it was 5 seasons from League Two to the Premier League. or 6 seasons, maybe. I think it was 5 seasons. So sort of like the quickest rise up the leagues. But to have a 25,000 seat stadium as a League Two club was pretty remarkable. I mean, it still is pretty remarkable, but especially back then, it was reasonably unheard of. And to have such a modern stadium, I remember, I think it was when I was talking to, sort of name dropping here, but when I was talking to Richard Garcia way back in our first season of the podcast about what attracted him to Hull. And I think it was probably the same for Irvine as well. I can't remember which of them said it, but even just the concept of going from a smaller club, like I think Garcia was at Colchester, but Irvine was at Burton, both sort of moving to these bigger clubs, or bigger club in Hull, with that larger stadium. And it's sort of something you don't really consider, but having that like larger capacity stadium, having more supporters in watching the team is a huge draw card for players, and really sort of symbolized our ambition.
Yeah, I think certainly something that I guess, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have it's not something I would have considered as a reason for players to like, I guess, consider those transfer moves. But it's interesting, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, actually, just before we move on, I'll use that as a good point, talking about players that I've interviewed. We do have our friends over at To Hull and Back interviewing David Myler. I think if I've got my time zones right, it will be Thursday morning our time, which is the Wednesday evening over in the UK. So if there's any Aussies watching along with this and want to join in live, I think it's sort of 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. our time live. But of course, you can catch a replay anytime after that. Looking forward to that one immensely. That will be really interesting to hear them talking to David Myler and see what he has to say about the club. Cool. Okay, well, let's move on then and do our little Who Am I game before we preview the Sunderland game. Are you ready?
As I'll ever be.
Yeah. Now, this one, as a warning, this one is a little bit of a trickier one, but we'll see how you go with this one.
All right, Sunderland, Honeyman.
No, I'm not going to try and do those links too much. I made 47 appearances for City and I scored 6 goals.
6 in 47. So that's like, it's like one season, like a full season, or no, I need like a time context, I think, to be able to like narrow it down. So we're gonna have to give me another clue.
No worries. I joined City in 2017, so that was our first season back in the Championship under Slutsky, and I left in 2020. And then as an added benefit, I'll let you know, so he had a loan to Vitesse towards the end of his time at the club. Which, funnily enough, I'm pretty sure Slutsky was there when he went to Vitesse, so he clearly liked linking up with him.
So down and then 17. All right, we said left 2020 with a loan somewhere in there as well.
Yeah. So I think he left in 2020. That must have been at the end of the season. So we got relegated with McCann, and I'm pretty sure he was on loan. Like he didn't play under McCann.
Yeah.
Don't think. Might have played right at the start of the season.
$47, scored 6. So I didn't actually play super regularly then.
Should be really interesting when I give you the next clue as to, like, his shirt number would indicate he'd play a lot more than he ended up playing. I said this is a tough one. I think this is probably the toughest one we've done so far.
I'm just trying to remember, like, who.
It's
it's like when we go down, I'm like, okay, who do we get rid of? Who do we sign? And I'm like, but Vitesse. The only name that comes to mind, I'm like, that's definitely not that person.
Yeah.
So I'm like, but
Who's the name?
the only thing I can think of is freaking Max Clark or whatever, who went
Yeah.
to
Okay.
like
Yeah.
the same. I don't think it was Vitesse, but that's
Yeah, I knew. I was like, I reckon that's who you're thinking of. And look, it's not a bad guess because I'm pretty sure he debuted in the team in 2017 and probably would have left in 2020. So he does fit the bill. I just
But-
don't think he scored any goals.
no. That's I was like, it's not him because like 6 goals is not. I was like,
Yeah.
46 and 47 feels like it's either like a shit striker we had, like a Tyler Smith of the time, even though we just said how like he had a really good performance on the weekend the other night, but
Do you want the next clue? Because that will narrow it down.
I guess I'm just having
And
full mind
actually,
blank about like everything.
I'll give you his position and number, and then if he's still not getting it, I'll give you the club we signed him from to see if that might trigger it. I was a striker, and I wore the number 9.
See, when you said something about the number before, I was like, I bet he wears the number 9, and it's
Yeah.
going to be supposed to be really
it's like who was number 9 back then? Do you want the club he was signed from? That might. I don't know. Actually, even know if that will give it away. Might not.
I'm just trying to work backwards through the 9s that we had.
You're doing better than me. I can't even name who. What number 9 now is Ali? Number 9 now?
I think so, and then you go back to. I assume Eves wore the 9.
Yeah, I
He
think
wore
Eves
the
was 9. You're right.
last-
So he must have got it from this
Yeah.
guy. I almost said his name there. So.
Do you want to take 2? I feel like this is embarrassing, but it's not.
No,
Or
it's not
probably is.
embarrassing. This is definitely a tough one. I'll tell you that we signed him from Wolves and was one of a string of players that we signed after they scored against us.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, now I can picture him. Oh. This is the same. This is like we signed like him, and then we signed Irvine, and then we signed.
Yeah.
Yep. Now that you say Vitesse, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah.
Like, he said like that he scored against us, and I'm like, oh, yep, now I know exactly who you're talking about.
My alter ego was an Australian Idol judge. I don't have that. Sorry, just confused you more.
Yeah, look, that's a reference that I'm not sure I understood.
Fair enough. Initials are ND.
Oh, yeah. Newer Dicko.
Yeah, there you go. Did you ever watch Australian Idol back in the day?
Yeah, now I get it.
No, I definitely, that was definitely the toughest one I've done. I was like, let's just throw someone obscure from a recent season in. Yeah, no, that was a tough one. You did well. Don't beat yourself up. I'm sure plenty of people would. It was funny because I'm pretty sure Clark did go to Vitesse as well. So I'm like, he's almost literally the same like trajectory at City, other than the goals, probably. Anyway, moving on. Sunderland this weekend. So we actually don't play again until the following Tuesday, I think, because of the Christmas weekend against Blackpool. So we'll just preview the Sunderland game this week. We'll do a couple of games next week just to take us through to the new year, just so we can all take a break over Christmas. But yeah, just Sunderland this week. So managed by Tony Mowbray, who took over from Alex Neil when he left to go to Stoke earlier in the season. They've won 2 in their last 5 because they lost to West Brom yesterday morning, but they did have a good win over Millwall 3-0. Basically, it was like the first game back from the World Cup because for some reason that was the only game that weekend for whatever reason. We haven't beaten them in the league since 2014 in the Premier League, but we did beat them in the League Cup back in the League One season we shared with them, but then drew both games in the league. And they're a pretty dangerous side. Like, they're doing reasonably well for a promoted team. Like, they've got Diallo in from United, who's going great guns for them. They've got Sims up top on loan from Everton, who's looking really sharp and dangerous for them. So it's not the game that on paper, you'd look at your Wigan or your Rotherham and you'd say those are games that we really should be going out and winning. This is a pretty, like, I wouldn't look at this game as a game against a promoted side. I'd look at this game as a game against like a Preston or a someone like that, as quite a dangerous game. But how do you see this one at home, in front of a big crowd, hoping for 3 points, I guess?
At home, we'll probably lose.
True.
We just can't seem to put it together at home. Look, I think, I don't know. It's so hard because it feels like, we had the few games under Rosenia before the break. Now we've had the break. It kind of almost it's kind of it's weird. It's almost like we're like almost starting a new season with a new manager, and we've got sort of no idea about what really to expect. But we're sort of not actually in that position. But yeah, Sunderland's, they're going really, really well. So I think it's obviously going to be a tough game. Pelkas obviously being out is going to be a big blow for us. And I think while Tufan, if he's the one that comes in, he doesn't offer us this, like, while he does offer some creativity and some, like,
he doesn't feel as mobile.
It's there's something that I mean, they're just different.
Yeah,
I guess that they're different players, but they don't both offer creativity, but I think in different ways.
Yeah.
Whereas Pelkas will move around a lot and get into the channels, into the pockets of space, and try and link up a lot more. Tufan is more likely to be just the one trying to, I guess, like, ping balls to release players, but he'll stay more central.
Yeah, he's a bit. Yeah, he's less mobile. He's more explosive in the sense that he'll sort of pick the ball up and then suddenly move forward and take a shot from long range, whereas Pelkas will try and weave his way through players. Yeah.
So I think we're obviously, like, potentially everything that we just spent a month working on in terms of, like, how we're going to build up our attacks and stuff, potentially, like, if we, with Pelkas as one of those key figures, sort of a lot of those plans potentially now get thrown out the window and we have to go to plan B. But obviously Oscar comes back as well. So that changes things as well. Because I think they actually, I think we mentioned it before, that like Tufan and Oscar had linked up in that early run, the run early in the season, we had linked up quite well. So potentially, if they can rekindle that fruitful partnership that they had going early on, then potentially could be good. But I think, like, I feel like this is similar to the game that we just the Watford game. Like, if we can get a draw or something, that would be a pretty good result. A win would obviously be exceptional, but I think also, like, if we don't pick up at least a point, it's almost unacceptable. Despite how tough this game's going to be. I think we're sort of a little bit adrift of where we want to be, where our ambition has, we're sort of misaligned, unaligned with our ambition at the moment, and I think we do need to start, picking up some points and improving our league position, because I think everyone had targeted this. We said, we'll get to the World Cup break and try to mitigate damage, and after that is where we start trying to consolidate, build, and move on up the table. So I think it's a matter of realistically just not getting further away from some of those teams that are around us. So points are almost just, points are always like a necessity and they're always an aim, but I think we just cannot afford at all to drop or to not pick up any points.
Yeah, I'm looking at our next three after the Sunderland game, and it's Blackpool, Birmingham, and Wigan. And you sort of think those are three very, very winnable games. And so you think going into those games off 4 points from Watford and Sunderland is such a massive difference from 1 point off the two. I think it's really interesting. I saw someone pointing out, I think it's 5 games under a senior now, and you look at the draw with Millwall, the win against Cardiff, was it 5? Because then it's the draw against Watford, obviously the loss to Reading. But point being that there's only one bad performance in that lot. You know, you sort of look at the win against Cardiff, the draws against Millwall and Watford as being really positive. And it's really just that loss against Reading that's a bit disappointing. So he has actually put a lot of work in already to turn the squad around to get that improvement in performances. I think there was the Middlesbrough game as well, maybe, that I'm thinking of. But anyway, so there are the signs there that we're improving. As you say, it'll be interesting to see what we do now with Pelkas out and how much he was sort of integral to the plans. But it was interesting to see there was an article just before the game where Rosenior was talking up Tufan, just saying like how good, how well he was responding on the training pitch, his fitness work, how he was taking on board what Rosenior was saying. So hopefully that means that he's sort of ripe to come in and start this game and really perform. But yeah, I think this is such a vital game in that sense, as you say, because we're clearly not where we want to be on the table. I think we're now in the relegation zone. I sort of had a few different conflicting reports on different apps I was looking at. So we're 1 point above Wigan, who are in the relegation zone. So, you know, we're still, I think, as Rosenior said, it's a points accumulation game at this point of the season. And a win against Sunderland would be massive ahead of those 3 games. And just thinking the opportunities are there to suddenly start to surge up the table that we've really just got to start to take. And you know, I sort of started by saying that these guys are not a promoted team, they're a mid-table team, but we should still be viewing a mid-table team as sort of there for the taking at home.
Yeah, well, I think realistically, like, that's where we would want to be, is as a mid-table, not a lower table, not a fighting for relegation. I think the quality we have in the squad, even with the injuries that we've sustained, with the quality that remains and the quality that is to return not too far away in another half dozen games, maybe, you know, means that I think there's that we should be looking not really over our shoulder at the teams below us, but looking up and looking at how you know, how high can we go, and just looking at it that way. And I think it's interesting that you say that about like Rosenior. I think like potentially that being you know, a younger manager who's sort of potentially, you know, went through his career with, I guess, like that the rise of social media and the media scrutiny and all those sorts of things, that potentially he like actually has a better understanding of how to play that game, to as part of that like player management and as part of like fan management and all that sort of stuff as well. Whereas like it has felt like with some of the previous managers, like that, you know, Shotter and McCann both just didn't really, you know, it was either they didn't say anything or they just said completely the wrong thing to the,
or just
to the
riddles.
media.
And you're just like, what are you
like
talking about?
like it never really like, and it's just nice to say, like, to just have someone come out and say, yeah, he's not playing, but like he's doing everything he needs to do. He's working hard, you know, he's listening to what I'm saying, and like that's
all you
good,
can ask for, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so like that's, you know, not that the players would, you know, get all their media training and everything as well. They know not to read too much into it, but like if you see, you know, you see a report and your managers come out and said like he's doing all the right stuff, and then like, you know, you're getting some game time, like that's surely like it's got to keep you happy, not
Yeah.
like, because I think there was someone who was just like, who did we say? It was probably Milinkovic or like something, but like who didn't really perform, but we were like, he's just not doing what he needs to do or something, and
Him
just
or
like rubbished him
Ben
in the,
Scott or something. Yeah.
and sort of got rubbished in the media, like by the manager, and then sort of never came good. And you're like, well, I wonder why. Like,
Yeah.
why would they want to try and turn it around if you're just going to say like,
Yeah. Oh,
I
and
don't know, it's
also,
like hard.
was it Wilkes? I'm trying to remember who it was. There was someone that McCann blasted in the media about his attitude or something. Might have been Wilkes. I can't remember. But so are we thinking then just a straight swap Tufan in for Pelkas and just leave everyone else the same? It's also obviously, Oscar to come in as well, I guess. So Oscar in for Smith as well.
I would think that Oscar and Tufan would come in. Because how did then?
Because Doherty came on, but then
Yeah.
back off. He
Yeah.
had
Which is very confusing. The
he
cork
had
or the
the
dead
corky,
leg or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. So we go Greaves, Macca, Jones, Christie, Ingram in goals, Sari Woods, Slater, the other one. Brains, they're gone.
Slater, Longman? Or would you go Longman out for Oscar? Because I guess at the moment we're doing Woods, Seri, Tufan would be the midfield, and then you'd have Slater, Longman, Oscar as the front three.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Or you take Slater, drop Slater further back, you don't bring Tufan in, and you bring Cynic in as a winger. Would be the only other natural option, I would think.
Yeah. I think Tufan will come in. So yeah, I guess that would be like Longman, Slater, Oscar up top with Seri Woods, Tufan in the middle, I suppose. Something like that would be my suggestion. Look, I don't know. I think
Or you play like a 4-4-2 diamond and have Smith and Oscar up top, which would be completely different to anything we've seen.
I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I don't know if it would happen. Look, I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. I'm hopeful. I think we played enough decent football that we can challenge, most teams. I mean, we challenged the top team in the last game. So I think I kind of feel like it's going to be like a 1-1 or something like that. But it's, a couple of changes forced, unfortunately, means that, potentially any like that. I mean, it's only one game, so any sense of rhythm is sort of falsified anyway. Yeah, something like that.
I'll go the 2-1. I'll back Oscar to get on the score sheet in his return in front of the home crowd as well. Sort of anniversary game. I'll back us for the win in this one.
I forgot. Looks like it's going to be a big crowd. I think they said they'd sold 17,500 tickets or something.
Yeah, I don't know what the latest on that was.
So it's probably which is good. I mean, it's good to see like those home games are still like, even though we're not necessarily performing the best, they're still building and they're still like consistently pretty solid. Because I think that's up like 6,000 or 7,000 or something on last season. We were only getting like 12,000 or something last season, weren't we?
Yeah, and I've just seen Ajun's put on free travel for the Birmingham and Wigan away games as well. We've got cheap ticket prices for the Fulham game, so lots of measures being done to just boost the crowds, which is really awesome to see.
Yeah, we've talked about it again heaps, but it's really nice just to have like an owner who just is really like is investing in smart ways as well. Like it's not like he's throwing bucket loads of money around. Like it probably doesn't cost that much to pay for a few coaches, like in the grand scheme of things, when you've got millions and millions and millions of dollars to pay for, half a dozen coaches or however many it is or whatever to ferry a few hundred supporters, 1,000 supporters or whatever from Hull to Birmingham, however far that is, but whatever.
On a coach, that'd be 8 or 9 hours. So it would help a lot, especially over the Christmas period when people are probably pretty stretched in their budgets. To just take one of the costs away from them having to worry about is awesome to see.
But as opposed to like the end of the previous, where it's just come to the games, don't come to games, whatever. Like it was very blah. It's nice. The effort, the enthusiasm, the positivity is great. I don't think I'll ever get over it. It's just nice. It's exciting.
And actually, I was just looking up that news. It reminded me, just a word briefly before we sign off, Andy Cannon joining Wrexham on a permanent move. Don't know if you've watched the
Welcome to Wrexham on Disney Plus soon.
Yeah, so he'll be in season 2, I'm sure. But quite seriously, for them, that's a massive get. I mean, he was on loan at was it Stockport last season when they won promotion from the league, so knows that league reasonably well in that sense. But obviously, is a player of quite a high quality to be playing in that league. He made league appearances for us this season. So no doubt a great get for them, and good for him as a player to be able to get that consistent game time.
Yeah, I think it's a good move. He's going to a place where he's 100% going to feel valued. He's bought into their vision. Unfortunate, didn't work out for him with us in any great extent, but it kind of did. Like when he signed, it was sort of like, I certainly
He
was.
scored against Preston on opening day. It was great.
He did. But when he signed, I went, Andy, who? So, not necessarily aligned with our ambitions. Not that an unknown player or a lesser known player can't succeed. You only have to look at Sam Clucas as an example or whatever. But he's a hard worker, but I think just doesn't necessarily have the quality that's maybe required at this level for to perform consistently. But a great acquisition for them. I think because I also read they had one of their midfielders was injured as well, so good timing on that acquisition for them. So he should hopefully he'll slot straight in and get plenty of football in the second half of this season, and hopefully get him promoted. Maybe we can play him in a cup game or something in a couple of years.
They've got Coventry in the third round of the FA Cup this season. So if they get through that, maybe we would be able to face up against them. And I mean, look, on the topic of outgoings, I'm sure there'll be a few more to discuss in the coming weeks. I know like Randall Williams has been given permission to look for a move elsewhere. So no doubt we'll have plenty more to discuss on that front. But until next time, thanks for joining me, Dan.
No worries.
Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening along. We'll be back this time next week to discuss that Sunderland fixture and look ahead to the festive fixtures. But until then, come on, City.